Oh, folks, I can't tell you how thrilled I am today to introduce and to be able to chat with Lauren Clarke. First up, hello and welcome to Hush Hush Biz chat. Um, and also, I want to congratulate you on the film that I've seen as to your legendary father, John Clarke. It just made a big splash in Melbourne recently at the Melbourne Film Festival. It's called But Also John Clarke. And that's a great title, Lauren. How did you come up with that one first up?
Oh, that was a great suggestion from the producer Richie Ketty. We were talking about how in Australia and in New Zealand, which are the two sort of major audiences for Dad's work, and those are the territories where the documentary's going as a feature into cinemas. So we were sort of trying to think of how do we sort of do we put the name John Clarke or the name Fred Dagg in the title? And of course, not only, but also, or not only Peter Cook, but also Dudley Moore. Sorry,
Yeah.
I'm going to be cutting that off, that dinging noise. Um, yeah, so it was a lovely way to reference that as well. And so what we ended up doing was in New Zealand, it's being referred to mostly as not only Fred Dagg, and in Australia, it's being referenced as but also John Clarke, which I think is hilarious on its own.
It has to be hilarious in any
Yeah.
case. If it has the name John Clarke in it, you are going to have a belly laugh.
That
I
actually
think,
was one of the very, very important things when putting together the film was, you want to go into a bit of depth and sort of get to those deeper issues, but at no stage can you sort of have that cinema untouched by laughter for very long at all. It needs to be, a minute at most.
oh, absolutely. And look, this is, obviously fabulous for you to be able to, put this together. And and look, throughout the film, there's some great footage, obviously, of, families, stuff
Mm.
that, you've had in the archives there with the likes of Sam Neill, David Winham, Ben Elton, Yana Vent. Oh my God. She was famous always
Mm.
for cracking up every, time when, you know, your father and Brian Daw were
Yeah.
on doing their satire of political characters or taking off what was the news bite that week.
Mm, mm.
So having got together with all these people, and obviously the film, says a lot in their treasured memories of your dad, and everybody
Mm.
loved him, you know. So, with making the film and doing all this, how's the process been for you? Sort of doing it and going back.
Well, it's been actually sort of in the end a bit of a privilege because, it's 8 years-ish
Yeah.
since we lost him.
Yeah.
And so, I think it would have been a very different film if we'd done it immediately. Because people in the film does sort of acknowledge that there was a moment for the audience, there was definitely a moment in the family where we all just were in shock. The family was in shock, and
Yeah.
his audience was in shock. And so, to be able to acknowledge that moment a little bit in the film is important, but also with a bit of distance. I'm there and I'm chatting to his friends and I'm chatting to people he used to work with, and some of them I've known my whole life and some of them I've never met before. And being able to sort of get to who he was and what he valued, and in a way, partly one of my processes was I was trying to not make it a sort of a hit reel or the Wikipedia page, but a film. So I wanted it to be a little bit conversational and a little bit collaborative as a process, which it turned out to be, so that there are so many. I mean, I'm in the film and I'm sort of narrating it a little bit, but there is also there's Dad's voice in there. There are his friends and colleagues, their voices, and so that was a pretty beautiful thing to be able to do and to do sort of. It's not a hagiography. It's not sort of it asks questions like, okay, so if he was a great guy and people loved him, which try as I might, people didn't really want to be anything other than delightful about him. If that's the case, sort of why is that the case? And like how did those like how he sort of he had a few things he had to overcome in his life and he had a few lucky breaks and so it's a little bit that process of like how does anybody become who they are, and how so to me creatively and I've done, creative I've never directed a feature, but I've been a writer and I've been a director and a kind of storyteller in a bunch of different forms my whole life. So it was a pretty great project in terms of solving all those little creative problems as you go. And the bonus was that I got to spend time with some of these brilliant people again.
Isn't that wonderful? Isn't
So
that
good.
just so good? And I think you're a chip off the old block. You are a writer, producer, and you've got a podcast, and you're a performer. So
Mm.
he must look down and say, "Ah, I'm proud of her. I'm so proud of her." You know.
That's lovely. But it did feel a little bit like a collaboration in a way, like with him, because he talked a lot about his own work. And so I got to kind of tap into that. But there are recorded conversation throughout the film, which are just audio, but that I recorded
Yeah.
when I would sit him down and ask him questions about his life. So you never sort of wondered too much. I wonder if Dad would agree with this because there was always something there that we could use that could tell us what he'd think,
Yes. Oh,
you know?
he was always great for, I don't know. He just, did he have, at home, did he always, do perform and, make everybody laugh? Was he always,
He was very funny. Like I remember when we were kids, there was like for instance at my birthday parties, I remember a birthday party when I was very young. There are photos of it. And there was a game of pass the parcel. And back in the old days, it was a bit harsh pass the parcel because you passed it around and you didn't win and you'd unwrap it and you didn't win anything. You passed it around and the next person didn't win anything. Next person, and then it was just the luck of the draw and one person would win the thing. But in our game of pass the parcel, I think just instinctively Dad must have cottoned on that yeah, kids would cry and they'd hold on to it extra long, hoping they could get it, all of that stuff. And then he must have cottoned on to the fact because in our game, you sort of, that wasn't the point. You almost didn't want you didn't want to be the winner because if you didn't win and you unwrapped the layer of the newspaper, as it then was, around the parcel,
yeah,
you would throw it theatrically away. And this man who was fastidious at wanting to collect the wrapping paper.
yeah,
He was very, very keen to make sure that it never touched the floor, but
yeah.
he was total shambles. And so he would fall and he'd nearly drop it and he'd catch it and he'd throw it other way. And it was completely pointless, completely pointless. And we were in complete hysterics. And there's a photograph of just a row of little children just going, like, what is going on right now? Because this newspaper man would be like darting around the room with the wrapping paper. And
Yeah.
by the end, you didn't care who won, So he really was. He was I mean, like a lot of, like a lot of people have got a funny person in their family, and he was pretty hard to beat. Although his father-in-law, my mum's dad, who was one of his closest friends, he was hilarious as well. So there was a bit of it. There was a bit of it in the
Oh,
family, and I think it's great because it teaches you to sort of not take things too seriously, including
absolutely.
yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great upbringing. Yeah,
Yeah, it's pretty
it's wonderful. It's wonderful. You know, in obviously today's comedy world and, what's going on, do you ever wonder what he would think of, the comedy and what's happening now? Do you,
it's one of those things where you sort of know he would have a point of view, but you kind of could never quite predict what he would say and what exactly that take would be. But I do think it's interesting that, when he was doing in New Zealand, he had a character called Fred Dagg, and
Dag? Oh, famous.
he would take a camera out, talk about slapstick, like the
Yeah,
newspaper guy. It was
yeah,
exactly the same thing.
yeah.
But he would take a camera out, and there was only one camera owned by the news department with the one TV station in New Zealand. He'd take it out to a paddock, and he'd put it in the paddock, and he'd go around in front of the camera, and he'd do his monologue, and then he would turn around and take the camera back to the newsroom, and then he would cut the film with scissors, and that would be how he would edit his thing. And those things were very brief, and the Clark and Door segments were very brief. And I just sometimes I look at TikTok or social
Mm,
media, and I think that's kind of what some of those things are close to doing. And
yeah,
I'm not sure where the next, like what the DNA of where the DNA of that is going to filter down. But I think it's in there, and I think
yeah,
it's there's something sort of um, that- in the film. One of the things I sort of wanted to do was a little bit sort of hint that you, the audience, you're creative. You might think that your vote doesn't matter. You might think that you can't be funny. You might
yeah,
because the
yeah,
world can kind of accidentally lend that idea to you a little bit too hard sometimes. But there's delight to be had
yeah.
in some of the language and the power structure stuff, and the technology's all there now.
Yeah, it sure is. And I am sure everyone that does go to see it, whether they knew John Clarke or not, are going to have a take-home package with it because there are some golden things there, you know,
Mm,
from, sharing, yeah, his challenges and difficulties and in potentially, what he struggled with his, upbringing to,
mm,
and to the showbiz, area. There are golden nuggets everywhere in the
mm.
film, and you've done an
Yeah.
exceptional job, Lauren.
Oh,
It's
thank you.
fabulous. Fabulous.
Well, we had a problem that somebody said to me early on, you've got a problem that a lot of documentarians don't have. They have the opposite, which is they will have a story to tell and they won't have a lot of material. Whereas you've got too much material, you've got too many
Yeah.
stories, you've got too much stuff,
Oh, so
and it's
editing would have been
going
a
to be
nightmare.
editing was impossible. I can barely believe it's out in the world. It's why I'm so thrilled to see it in a cinema because it was in
Oh,
our
wow.
heads for so long. We were very lucky with Alec Morton, the brilliant editor, and I. We just knew that we needed to get that singular thread, and it needed to be sort of light enough that you
Mm.
felt like you were falling through like there's more to be had here. There's
Yeah.
so much stuff that's not in there, but that it's sort of and hopefully, like you said at the outset, like the one of the joys was realizing that there was an usher the other day at one of the MIF screenings who was European and had never heard of Dad and had never heard of me and watched the film and said she laughed and she cried and she's going to go back and YouTube, go on YouTube and check it all out. So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
And
so
there is so much on YouTube from,
yeah,
there's a load of stuff. So, but I love the fact that, yeah, you might be able to come back with a director's cut of, the hip picks. That would be a
yeah. Have
really
you
good
have
part
you got
too.
17 days? There's so much. There's so much. I mean, some of those people we interviewed, can you imagine? We use, David Wenham 3 seconds, and we spoke to him for two and
Oh,
a half hours. I think I could make a documentary
yeah,
about Ernie Dingo from the
yeah.
3 hours I spoke to Ernie Dingo, and
Oh,
he's only in it occasionally, but um,
oh,
and Ben Elton, yeah, like you say, we got to speak to all these brilliant people, and
people.
some people we spoke to aren't even in it.
Well, yeah,
So
yeah, exactly. I could just, yeah, there are notable people. I know Andrew Wright, and I've spoken to Andrew, who was his co-writer there for many years.
Andrew Knight, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah. And
Mm,
sorry, Knight. Did I say right?
yeah.
Ah.
No, no, no. Yes. Well, he was great. He said one of my favorite things, but it didn't end up in the film.
Oh,
Jeez, he's funny. I said to him, I said, look, when we were trying to get this film up, um, people kept asking me, but do you think, is it going to be an interesting story? Isn't everybody going to be very nice about John? And isn't that a bit boring? What was John's dark side? And I think the reason they asked me this is because, there's this idea that which I completely can see could be the case of the family wanting to protect the dark secrets of the real guy. But in this case, I was sort of trying to say, you see the tip of an iceberg and you think that's John Clarke that I know off the telly, and you wonder what's under here, and it might be a shark or different universe or a portal to a hellhole or something. And it's pretty much a continuation of what you see on the top. So
yeah,
but I said to Andrew, I said, yeah, they said to me, what's John Clarke's dark side? And without even blinking and totally deadpan, and Andrew says, do we have to talk about the serial killings? And I was just not expecting it. And it's half off camera, like we've walked out of the shot, but oh my God, I laughed for so long because he absolutely understood that this was what that's not what this story is. It's not going to be
yeah,
he was actually a dickhead. It's going to be, I mean, he was my dad. I used to have excruciatingly annoying conversations with him.
yeah,
As a daughter, I'm sure, but I had a great uncomplicated love for him and he for me and everyone in the family of four. So it
yeah,
is a story of like that love, but it's also a story of breaking the cycle in a way because as you said, he came from an era where there wasn't a lot of like room for that in a family, and particularly not in his family. So
yeah.
anyway, so I did think that was a pretty funny way of thinking about it. Do we
Well,
have to
Lauren,
talk about serial
yeah.
killings?
Yeah, no, that's great. Lauren, I know we are out of time now. I could talk to you forever. Um, and I
Absolutely.
hope that we can, yeah, have a return back. But
I'd love to.
you need to go on a plane and basically I want to say thank you. And we're going to give a big shout out to the film and truly, yeah, congratulations again and thank you for talking with us
Thank
at
you.
Hush Hush Film.
Uh, I'm delighted. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a good flight.
I will. Thank you. We did it on time. But call
Yes,
me if you
we
need
did it.
anything.
We did it.
Good on you. Thanks again.
Thank
Bye.
you. Thank you.